We've been talking about going from a harsh inner critic or an outer critic or a lack of an inner voice to a compassionate dialogue. And we've really been focusing on that this month. What might be a block that makes it hard to really shift out of that? You can put it in the chat box or you can raise your hand.
Hi. I noticed a harsh outer critic. Like, I knew that I had a harsh inner critic, but now I see that the outer critic is like a protective mechanism that I wasn't even aware of. It's like then my brain gets stuck in rumination, having a billion negative thoughts about someone. And I try to tell myself to stop, like, that's so mean and harsh, but it's like I can't even stop the harsh thoughts. And then I feel so much shame. I feel so guilty. Like, am I a bad person for thinking like this about someone else?
What an awesome share. Thank you so much for bringing this to the table. I know with myself, when I was working through my harsh inner critic, because that's what I had, like I was nice to everyone, but I was so bad with myself in my own mind. But when I started changing that, it's funny how our protective pieces start morphing. And I never had a harsh outer critic, but I suddenly did. And what I realized, so as my protective self was like, oh, okay, she's changing that, it morphed into something else, which was the harsh inner critic. The harsh outer critic. What helped me with that, first noticing it. The second I was being harsh about somebody else, I'd be like, oh, okay, there's the protective self. What is it trying to protect me from? And in my case, oftentimes it was shame. I was feeling shame or I was feeling insecure about something. And so that I didn't see that, because remember, the protective self is all about trying to not get us to see what actually is happening. Kind of like I use the illustration a lot when my kids would get shots when they were babies, and I'd take their face and I didn't want them to watch. For whatever reason, I thought that was helpful. Well, the protective self is like that too. It's like, don't look at your shame. Look at them. Let's focus on them. Let's find fault with them. And then you don't got to feel that shame. So the reason I share this, I would invite you to think about like when that happens, when that harsh outer critic comes on, rather than identifying with it like, oh no, is this me? Am I a bad person? What if you were like, what is this protective piece trying to keep me from feeling?
Oh my God, that's so true. I just figured it out. It is shame for me too. If I stare at the faults of others, then I don't have to feel my own shame.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so true because it usually happens only in triggering situations. And I do have toxic shame. That's definitely something I deal with, but I didn't think about how that connects until I really started working with the inner critic this month. So this has been very interesting to me. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Once we can learn what we're trying not to feel, we can now support the real root cause, which is the shame in the body. The shame in the body is what our protective self is seeing happens and thinks we're too small to feel that because at one time we were. So it's like, oh, I got to do something because at one time no one was there to help us with the shame. Just the protective self would kick on, and it had this limiting way of helping us, which were these coping skills, right? This harsh inner critic, harsh outer critic. So once you can know that, now my question, my invitation to anyone that resonates with this is to, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being way too strong to be with, 1 being piece of cake, how comfortable is it for you to be with shame when it comes up in your body? Let me know in the chat box. Because there was a time when I first started, I could not be with it at all. I would dissociate. I would disconnect completely. Okay, so we have 10, 8, or not at all, 9, 8 or 9, more comfortable now. So yeah, I would encourage you, what was it in the past and what is it now? Because sometimes it's really nice to be able to notice that number changing. I'm not sure I know when it's happening. I need to observe more. Maybe frozen. 10 to 1. Oh my. That's amazing. Wait, I have to do a celebration reaction. Hold up. There you go. Okay. Now it's better than before. Again, put the numbers up because let yourself see the change. Yeah. So that might be something that we could work with today, since that's something that a lot of us work with. I'll put a pin in that and see if maybe that's something, but I want to leave space for anyone else as you're working through or with your inner dialogue. Is there anything else you notice that's challenging or that might be stopping you or creating a roadblock?
Yeah, I wrote this in the chat box, but with me, I struggle with feeling frozen and it feels impossible to be able to feel safe in my body.
Yeah. Okay. Another great thing to bring to the table, because this is a reality, right? If we're frozen or if we're numb and disconnected, usually if we're numb, I'll first address that one. Like a part of us is numb. It's usually because there's so much activation. I say this all the time, but repetition for emphasis. There's so much activation. Our body's trying to find balance. And so it overcompensates, right? It's almost like if I have a sore here, and then all of a sudden I get like something to put my whole arm to sleep. That's basically what our nervous system is doing. It's like, oh, that's overwhelming. Let me like give you a ton of emotional Novocaine, and now you don't feel it. And then when it comes to freeze, where with freeze, it's almost like we can feel like the whole body. It's funny. I was telling my husband earlier today, I was telling him, when I was in the fawn in the beginning, that's how I started my recovery. I was in fawn all the time from childhood. But when I was coming out of fawn, again, my nervous system was like, oh, something's happening. We got to do something else. It went into freeze, and it can feel like someone's got a control and it's pushing buttons on your body. And it's horrible. So just throwing that out there for anyone that's working on freeze and numbness. Honestly, as you're hearing about the inner dialogue, you can be curious, definitely be curious about, learning to be more aware of what you're saying, but you might have to really slow things down and just learn to be with the freeze and the numbness and have moments of being out, like pendulating into noticing the numbness, the freeze, and then noticing a part that's not frozen. So maybe that's something too that we can do as well. I'm curious, yes or no, how many might find themselves in functional freeze where you're experiencing freeze a lot? Yes or no in the chat box. Okay, so we got some yeses and maybes. All right, so I think this gives me a good idea of what might be helpful. So I'll throw this out, and you guys let me know if you think this would be helpful for you guys. Maybe we can do some pendulation with freeze. If you don't have freeze and you have activation, you can pendulate with your activation. But we could spend some time with that. And then if there's time, we can do an exercise building the capacity to be with shame. Sound like a plan for today? For those that don't know me, my name is Michele. I'm a trauma-informed coach and a somatic experiencing practitioner. I'm also the founder of the School of Transformation, where survivors of emotional abuse, whether it's narcissistic abuse or childhood emotional neglect, meet together live on Zoom, and we do the inner healing work together. So I'll leave the link here for anyone that might want to check that out. There is currently a 7-day free trial.